last-minute shake-up at 5:30 a.m., laundry situation not good. And when your focus is on helping your clients, it's easy to forget about yourself. But NASM knows trainers.
Morning, Ryan. It's okay.
And staying in front of the day isn't always as simple as 1, 2, 3. So when the unexpected has you pressing pause,
what's the latest on creatine?
I'm going to get back to you on that.
let NASM1 help you press play. Visit NASM.org to sign up for a membership today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Master Instructor Roundtable. I'm Marty Miller here with co-host, dear friend, Wendy Batts. Wendy, how's everything going today?
Everything is good, Marty. How are you?
Good, good. Today's going to be a great topic. I mean, I think all of our topics are great, but we got a dear friend, Mr. Rodney Corn, who's the Director of Education for Alico, but we know him from when we first started our journey with NASM. So I know that you and I both say he's one of the people who taught us the most about human movement, periodization, the OPT model. But today we're going to bring Rodney in. Topic is raising the bar, Olympic lifting insights.
Yes, I am super stoked. So everyone always asks Marty and I, we always say we want to surround ourselves with the smartest people in the room. Well, Rodney Corn is definitely one of those guys. He's been our mentor for over 20 years, or especially mine, because when I came in, I thought I knew a lot. Then I met Rodney and found out I knew a little, and I had a lot more to learn. So, super, super excited to have him on board. Marty, I don't know if you have gotten yours yet, but this actually just came into the mail. This is the new PES textbook. It's back. I don't know if you guys can see this. If you're driving and just listening, it's really thick. It reminds me back in the day when our first CPT real book came out that had a ton of information in there. So we are going to be talking specifically with Rodney on chapter 15, which is his chapter that he authored. So let's go ahead and bring him in so he can talk about Olympic lifting. Rodney, how are you?
I am very well. Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me on as always.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for being here because we know you are super busy. Marty, I'm going to go ahead and ask the first question because I really want to know the answer to this. You obviously have such a background and putting the model together with Dr. Clark. And so when we actually asked you about the Olympic lifting chapter and you said, yes, I'll be happy to author this chapter, what was your inspiration into writing this particular chapter for the new PES textbook?
Well, the inspiration was one from the outline that they gave me. So they said, here's kind of what we'd like to have. And I thought it was great because they actually had a lot of stuff that would be very key. And obviously knowing the NASM methodology and the OPT model process and understanding kind of what they would want to see. So that was first and foremost kind of the structure. That was the framework. That was the most important thing to get my head wrapped around it. And then from there, it's just based upon what we do at Alico. So what we do is have a very organized, systematic approach, much like NASM has a organized, systematic approach. And there's a reason for that. So that's what was the inspiration. It's based upon what I've done, what we teach, and things that I've done for many, many years now.
Excellent. Makes sense knowing you, Rodney, and coming from NASM. But for those that are new to the concept, how would you define Olympic lifting in the context of performance enhancement?
Yeah, so Olympic lifting will be the Olympic lifts and their derivations. So any of the derivatives that are used of the Olympic lifts. So there's two primary Olympic lifts, but they're actually, one of them's broken up in two. So we have the snatch, which is from floor to overhead in one motion. And then we have the clean, which is from floor to chest in one motion. And then from chest and up, which is the jerk component. So we teach those as three different ones. And then the beauty of the Olympic lifts is there are built-in stages to each one of the lifts. So that'll answer probably all the questions that most people have. It'll go back to those. So it's any of those derivatives. So we have multiple things, anywhere from a form of a deadlift to more of what's like a power shrug, or doing more of a shrugging motion, but that's part of the actual lifts. So anything that's associated with kind of those Olympic lifts is what in the chapter is defined as Olympic lifting.
Love it. So when people ask you this question, like, why is Olympic lifting such a valuable component of an athlete's training program? how do you respond to that?
Well, it goes back to when we're looking at what's one of the most important aspects of an athlete, and that's to the rate of force development. So when you look at the Olympic lifts do specifically that, because it's all about power. Athletes need to have power. So these are vitally important for increasing the rate of force development, which is essentially power, how fast we can access our force and how well can we do it.
Right. And Rodney, how does your programming in the chapter balance safety, effectiveness, and then obviously performance gains?
Yeah, so this goes back to how we teach that. So at Laco, one of the things that we do is we make it very systematic and very easy. When they hear the word Olympic lifting, they immediately think of the entire lift, and they immediately think of the competition that they see on television, whether it's especially in the Olympics, and they think of these people lifting large amounts of weight. And it's like, I'll never be able to do that. And that's completely wrong. They are exercises no different than any complicated exercise. So each one of them has a specific number of phases that you go through. So when we teach it from the top down. So there are technically 3 starting positions for the snatch and the clean. You can start at kind of a high hang, which is more the hip position. You can start at a low hang, which is more the knee position, and you can start at the floor. So obviously, from a learning continuum, you want to start from simple to complex. So we teach everything from the hip first, and then when you get the hip, then we work down to the knee. And then where you catch the bar is also in different positions. So we go through and define it, but there's a hang, clean, or snatch, which is what we're talking about, starting higher than the floor. And then there's a power form of that, which is where you catch it in more of a quarter or half squat versus a low squat. So when you start with the simplistic versions of them, which would be a hang power, I start at the hip, and when I finish, I'm in a high catch, so I'm not going into a full squat just yet. Then that's how you can create simplicity. In order to get the bar above your head or to your chest, depending on whether it's the snatch or the clean, you have to go through certain motions. So you have to shrug, and you have to high pull, and then you have to pull under the bar. So there's 3 components to that. Each one of those has to be taught, and then they have to be synchronized and put together. So that's what we do, is we organize. Here we're going to start from the hip because it's easiest. That also takes out mobility issues, because if people don't have great dorsiflexion, they don't have great ability to get into triple flexion, which most people do not have the ability to get into triple flexion. Then we start them at the hip, and then we work. Can you go from hip to shrug? Yes or no? We start slow, we go fast. So what you see in the Olympics is the most elite version of the lifts. But that's not what the athlete has to train with. They have to get used to doing the lifts, because it also improves coordination, because you have to sync and link all of the motions together, which means you have to make your nervous system do something that is not necessarily common because people don't do it. But in sports, if you can't do that, you're not going to be very good at the sport. So that's one of the reasons and of how the Olympic lifts have the ability to enhance not only just I say physical, but it's the neurophysiological aspects that you have to do, because you have to create coordination. And coordination is a unique factor rather than just strength, because you can be strong without having a coordinated strength. So that's kind of what we do with that.
I love it. Well, you kind of answered some of my next question. So besides obviously watching somebody on TV and trying to mimic what they're doing in the gym, what are some other common mistakes that you see, especially, I mean, obviously loading the bar too much and then trying to be something that they're not. But I know when I go into the gym and I watch people do certain things, I just have to put my hat down and close my eyes and just go on my merry way. But what are the most common things you see? And then as a coach, how would I kind of cue them out of this, or what do I need to be aware of?
Yeah, so that's a whole webinar in of itself. But to shoot to the point, the biggest thing with the weight lifts, with all the Olympic lifts we're talking about, is no different than any other exercise. They don't know how to get positioned to set up, and then they don't know the actual motion that they're supposed to incur. In the Olympic lifts, you have multiple motions that need to be segmented, especially if you're in a little bit more advanced stage. So beginners don't have to start with, well, we got to do the whole thing. No, it's, can you actually get into the position and can you do a shrug? Can we start with that right there? So that's where people fail. People will look at the textbook and they'll see pictures, and then people try to replicate the picture. And that is not a good way to learn the Olympic lifts. It's not like a curl where you go from a straight elbow position to a bent elbow position. It's more complicated than that. So where people get off is they try to just watch somebody do it and then do it. There are so many nuances, and that's one of the things that is so vital with any exercise is how do you get set up? And then with the Olympic lifts, you have to maintain those positions, because those positions are what create the initial balance and stability to create the leverage that you're going to need to move. And then as you go through the movements, you have to maintain those positions in order to maintain the balance, the stability, and the leverage that you're going to need to complete the lifts. And so that's where people get off, is they don't know exactly how the hands are supposed to be positioned. That's a huge thing, because Olympic lifting is a dance. You are moving a bar and you're generating momentum with the bar, and momentum creates inertia in the bar, and inertia says that an object in motion will stay in motion. So if we can get the bar to remain in motion, we move around the bar. And if you move around the bar, then it becomes much more simplified than trying to move the bar to fit where you are. And that's where the common mistake is. Poor setup, poor technique during, and then they're trying to learn based upon just watching someone, or, oh, I kind of got the idea, instead of actually going and finding out, how do I do these lifts?
So if you can't dance, you shouldn't lift. Is that what you're saying?
No, if you can't dance, you got to learn to dance.
Just kidding.
See, Rodney's always got the,
always the answer.
You always think you're
going to learn
to
to dance.
I've been watching this for 20 years. You haven't stumped them yet. But Rodney, I love that. Simple to complex, these micro progressions and regressions. So, can you explain a little more detail? How do you recommend progressing a beginner? You've already kind of talked about it a bit, through some of these Olympic lifting movements safely and effectively.
Yeah. So it's really kind of what I was just saying. And at the very beginning, I said, because the lifts have built-in phases to them, that is a natural progression. And that's the most overlooked thing that people don't realize about the Olympic lifts, is that if you break the lifts down, you already automatically have your built-in progressions. So to go back to what I said earlier, when we teach our course, the live course, doesn't matter who's in the audience. We have people who've never ever Olympic lifted before, and we have people who are doing local competitions, and so they compete. Everyone walks away learning something. It's just the more you know, the more you'll be able to take and enhance what you're doing. If you don't know anything, you'll leave knowing exactly how to do the lifts, but it's not about load. It's, do I understand the movements? Because you got to do the movement for the load. So we start everybody at the hip. So we get everybody to understand how the setup is going to be. So our feet have to be in there. So we go through a very simple process. What's your stance? That means what's your feet? What are your feet doing? What's the width? What's the toe angle? Because that all has a huge impact on that. Then what's your grip? What's the width of the grip based on the lift that you're doing? Because there's two different grip widths based on each lift. That's the snatch or the clean. And then what's your wrist position? Because the wrist position actually controls where the bar is at. So if my wrist is in extension, that means the bar is actually moved. So if I take my wrist here, I go here, the bar moves centimeters from your body. Well, if that bar is centimeters from your body, mechanics tells you that that's going to weigh more and it's going to have more effect on how your body is positioned. So we teach people how to get into the right position, and then we go from the hip. First thing we do is go from hip, and then you go learn how to shrug. Can you go from hip, triple extend into a shrug, balance on your toes? Yes or no? So once we go through that, then we go to the high pull, and then we go to the pull under and the catch. And so that's how people learn it in a progressive sequence. So that's how we teach everybody, regardless of who they are that come in, because even people who have been competing, it never fails. We have people go, wow, I was never told that. Because a lot of coaches don't have a systematically organized process of how to teach the lifts and all the nuances. They just get the person in, they start from the floor, and they just start moving. And people aren't accustomed to that because there's so many nuances and so many components to it that it can be very complicated to start with. Make it simple, work to more complex. So from the hip, and then we progress to the knee. And some courses, we never get to the floor because the people that are in the course, that's not the right thing for them. So we're not trying to teach everyone what to do. We're trying to teach them how they can do what they're capable of doing. So it starts with their ability, and then it works to how much more complexity we're going to give them.
I love it. Well, Rodney, before we actually ask you the next question, we want to say thank you for joining us today on the Master Instructor Roundtable with myself, Wendy Batts, and Marty Miller. We are here with Rodney Corn, who wrote our chapter for the Olympic lifting in the new PES textbook. So we are raising the bar for sure. And this episode is brought to you by NASM, or this episode of the Master Instructor Roundtable is brought to you by NASM One, the membership for trainers and coaches. Members enjoy unlimited access to hundreds of career resources. Get the Edge app to schedule and program clients. Enjoy half off all certifications and specializations. Access free CEUs and more. All of this for just $35 a month. Go to nasm.org/membership to learn more about NASM One. So Rodney, when we always talk to coaches, it seems like when they're, like you said, when they're teaching their athletes that they're going to do Olympic lifting, it doesn't matter the sport to them. If they are their strength and conditioning coach, they are teaching some of these youngsters how to do Olympic lifting, but they're not really tailoring it to different athletes or sports. So in your recommendation, should all athletes do Olympic lifting? And then if so, how do you tailor it to different sports?
So the simple answer is yes, every athlete can do Olympic lifting, and it doesn't matter the sport that they're doing, because what you're doing is you're developing rate of force production, because that's the key. The sport itself and the training of the sport itself actually transfers that into the sport. So once the nervous system knows how to turn things on, the actual sport and what they have to do, whether it's swimming, whether it's bicycling, it doesn't matter what it is, your body is getting more acclimated to initially producing that force at a high rate. So that's the short answer. And that's, a lot of people think that you have to train very specific to the sport. The catch-22 with that is if you're doing stuff similar to the sport, your movement patterns are very similar to the sport, you're actually creating more overload to that particular person, or overtraining specifically, or pattern overload than a lot of people think. So there's a fine tune and there's a balance to it. Now, the other side of that question is not everybody, or the answer is not everybody has to do the Olympic lifts at the same level. So whether someone's pulling from the hip or pulling from the knee, or the floor, depending on their specific ability level, I mean, what's their mobility, what's their strength, what's their ability, that's a secondary metric, basically, that you're kind of wanting to look at for how should we be using this for somebody. And I think being more individualistic based upon someone's ability would be more effective than worrying about how dramatically are we changing the lifts, because you don't need to change the lifts. They're going to do what they do, but it's not the only thing you're going to do in your training program. So this is one lift or lifts that you're going to be doing as part of your training program, if that helps.
No, that's great, Rodney. I think this kind of correlates into, my next question is, what are your thoughts on modifying Olympic lifts for clients with mobility, which you've already addressed, limitations, or previous injuries?
Yeah, same thing. So where are they going to start? So at Eleiko, when we teach all this, we start with number one, you have to know ability. So their ability has two components. What's their general level of ability and what's their daily ability? What can they do right now? Because that changes from day to day to day. So we modify programming variables on a day-to-day basis, but we adjust where they're at based upon what's their ability level, which goes back into part of your general ability is what's your mobility, what's your strength, what's your understanding or your experience with the lift specifically. So again, each one of those lifts could look different for somebody. So when we say a snatch, they may not do the actual catch of the snatch for weeks, depending on what they're doing. But there's ways to blend that in. I'm sure you guys have a question that has to do with programming. There's ways to blend all this stuff in so you can actually get someone to start using load that's appropriate for them to start increasing their rate of force production right now without going into the full lift where they're not physically capable and or mentally and physically capable of actually doing a complete lift. So we break it into phases, and you can spread that out through all parts of the programming, especially from an OPT model standpoint.
Well, it's like you're a mind reader, Rodney. It's like, Marty and I way too well, because my next question is actually on designing programs. So when you are designing a performance program, where should the Olympic lifts be placed within the training session or a training week?
Yeah. So, and again, I'll go right back to when we think of Olympic lifts, don't think of what you see in the Olympics with them doing this full massive lift, because that's the competition Olympic lift. But again, the Olympic lifts have phases to them. So, remember I said a few minutes ago, go from the hip, and can you go up into a shrug and balance on your toes? So you got to be up on your toes, because that's triple extension. So I can put, and in the chapter, you'll see how they're put through the whole program. So they're in the warm up, they're in the kind of the skill section, they're going to be in the programming section. You can put them anywhere you want to. It's what you're doing with them, and obviously the load that you're doing, that you're trying to get. So we can get people to work on the shrug balance. Can you shrug and balance? Hold that, because that's going to be key. Because if you can't balance in that position, what's going to happen when you have to dive under the bar? You have to make sure that you're able to do these things. So you can have components of it, doing overhead, just having the ability to do overhead or overhead squats in a wide stance or a wider grip, just getting them to squat, obviously to where they can, but you're getting them used to going through the squat motion, because in a snatch, you're going to have to catch the bar and you're going to have to be in some form of squat, whether it's a higher squat or a lower squat. So those can be part of a warm-up. You're getting those things. But if somebody can go from the knee and they can go up into a shrug, and they're able to do that very well, then we can start putting the load that's specific to their ability level, so they can start generating strength power, and they're able to get more rate of force production out of it. So we can break down the loads to what can they do successfully, and how can we bleed that into various phases of the actual OPT model. So in my head, and what we teach at LACO is, don't just think of, if you can't do the whole lift, then it's no good. Totally false. Matter of fact, the one of the highest force outputs or power outputs that has ever been registered is from what they call a hang clean, which is a mid-thigh pull, just from here and just coming up. And it's actually the shrug component. That's the highest force output. So if that's all somebody can do, why wouldn't you do that if you can get the highest force output, making sure that the person who's doing it actually has the ability to do it correctly, and you're not just loading it up.
That's great, Rodney. And hopefully my book comes today. I'm going to go right to chapter 15, because my aha moment is, I haven't really done Olympic lifting for various reasons, but I was just thinking about what you're talking about, activities of daily living, or what I might see in sport. Those partial lifts probably have much more carryover than if I ever did a full lift. So I'm like, pretty fascinating information right there, Rod. So
yeah, when we go through some research in the book, how it relates to sprinting. So when you're doing those lifts, that's not like a sprint motion, but it has impact on sprinting. It actually has impact on agility. So when you have change of direction speed, and you're able to enhance change of direction speed by just doing something where you're going straight up and down, that's because it is rate of force development that you're training. If you can train that, then when you work other components, you're able to transfer that into those other components.
No, that's excellent. So how would you integrate Olympic lifting with other power and strength movements in that periodized plan?
That really comes down to who are we talking about. So you can use plyometric exercises. So plyometric exercises are great. When you're going through different phases of training, so you can use the Olympic lifts in the power phase, which people think, but you can use it anywhere. You can use it when you're doing the stabilization strength or the strength stabilization stuff. You can still use them in there. So it's not that they fit somewhere, and that's the thing, because it all goes down. What changes that is your acute variables. Mm-hmm. So if you don't know acute variables, then you probably shouldn't be training to begin with. But when you know the acute variables, then you know, here's what I can do, because they can fit into they can be part of hypertrophy if you want. I wouldn't recommend that, because they're so complicated. You don't want to do that many repetitions of them. Really, the max repetitions, if you're doing a full snatch or a full clean, the max repetitions you want to do for the typical person is going to be about 5. So this is more of a max strength or power phases that the full lifts are going to fit better in, but the components of those can fit in any lift, because you can do a deadlift in anything that has to do with strength. But we do a snatch deadlift, which it's a wide grip, and you're just mimicking the first two pulls basically of the snatch. You can do the same with a clean grip, which is what a lot of people would do anyway. So, and then you can bring in the shrug if you want to. So all of this stuff can fit in various places. It doesn't have to be just these are special lifts that go anywhere, because if you're ever going to get good at doing the lifts, you have to get used to going through the motions and understand what types of things you do. Can you go through shrug high pull? Can you pull under the bar for a snatch, or can you pull under the bar for a clean? Because you can do those at lower levels. And then you can do some of the things you can do really well at higher levels, meaning load and or intensity and acute variable manipulations, until you start piecing them together and you make it into one clean lift at a certain weight.
So Rodney, I actually have a kind of a two-part question. So the first one, what are the matrix or the signs that you're looking for when you're, tracking progress to an Olympic lift, or a readiness that they can progress forward? And the other part of that is on the other side of the spectrum, obviously with NASM and the CPT going through with some of the beginners, which is a lot of our listeners, everyone loves to do Olympic lifting if they've done them in the past. People that have never done them are scared to do them. So, you're saying that everybody can do them and you can break it up in components. But if someone does have like rounded shoulders and a forward head, or we know that they are upper trap dominant, would you wait to introduce some of these because of the shrugging and because of the overhead lifting that you need to do, even if it's compartmentalized, you're separating different pieces of that? Like, how does all that work?
Oh, Wendy, that is a great question.
Did I get you?
No, it's, I give you the answer. I have to make sure I say this correctly for our audience and for you guys. People who have, well, first off, let's just start with, nobody has any form of perfect posture. So
you're close.
If that was the case, and then the caveat with that, I do not want to get into a tangent because it's turning into a 3-week dissertation. But the caveat with that is, just because someone looks like they have great posture doesn't mean everything's working well. And how do you know if it is or isn't? So that's a whole different game. To be very simple, if someone has postural things, there's two primary reasons why we have compensation. One is neuromuscular, which we're all taught. Oh, we've got this, and this. And that's not that difficult at all to fix. The other one is motor learning. And that means I'm totally unaware of what I'm supposed to do and how I'm supposed to be positioned. So we always go to neuromuscular and we try to get everyone to do this and do that and do this and do that and do that and do this, instead of just seeing, can you actually get into that position and hold it? Yes or no? Can I put you into that proper position and can you hold it? Yes or no? So what we find, and that's part of our process that we go through in the ALECO education with the training the lifts, is we have the stance, we have the grip, we have what's your relationship between the body and the bar. It means where is your body relative to the bar and what's the bar going to be relative to you. And then we have what's called tension. Can we create tension in the right places of the body to actually put the body in a much better position than you are right now? And I'm going to be very honest, after 25 years of doing all this and seeing this, if you create the right tension in the right places and you get low activation in certain areas by just getting the person to do it and helping them, sometimes kinesthetically, 70 to 80% of the time, they can get into an adequate position to get them to start moving, but you're not going to load them up with some ungodly, stupid loads. You always have to go back to what's their ability, their general ability. So we still will go through, but that goes back to, if someone doesn't have great posture, what posture can they get in? What can they actually put themselves to? And then where are we going to start them? This is where the Olympic lifts are beautiful, because they have built-in progressions. If someone lacks triple flexion, which most everybody in the world does, unfortunately, because we never worked that, and they can't get into a good squat position or a hinge position to get down to the floor, then don't start them there. You don't have to. That's not necessary. So the beauty of the Olympic lifts is they give you the opportunity, and then just working certain movements. And yes, you can still do shrugs with people, even if they're trap dominant, because 80% of the people walking around the planet are trap dominant, because they haven't actually taught themselves how to not be trap dominant, and they don't know why they're trap dominant. We just assume that happens out of nowhere, and it doesn't. There's a very, very specific reason that happens. So yes, you can, but what happens is you have to go back to, again, as a coach or a trainer, you need to understand how to actually get in the position and how to get set up, what the setup actually entails. And by just looking at the pictures in the book, you're not going to necessarily find that. So you're going to want to go somewhere where you can actually get that training in a live setting. And I can tell you where you can go to get
Well,
that.
hopefully at the end of this, you will.
Takeaways. Awesome. Rod, well, I have one more question. I have a lot more questions, but I'm only going to ask you one more out of respect for your time. So what do you hope coaches and trainers take away most from this chapter when they're working with their athletes in the real world?
I hope that they see the benefits, number one, because the benefits are laid out there. I hope that they see that there's different phases. And I hope that they take away the importance of actually getting people into the right positioning to go through them. I also hope they see that you can't learn the lifts by looking at the chapter necessarily. You're not going to be able to just say, okay, I go do this by this, by this, by this, by this. So that should bring the curiosity to, if there's a place to go get it done, then I would like to go see that, because once you see it, that chapter now comes to life, because you're like, oh crap, it's all right there.
There seems to be a common theme with these live workshops. I'm telling you, Rodney.
Think about it. This is a complicated movement. Do you want to learn it by trying to decipher a chapter that's 30 pages long or whatever? Or do you want to get that information, understand how that information, and see that all the information behind it? These have a huge relevancy to that. You also have programming in that chapter, which that's the most important thing. Where can I, as a trainer, put them in there? And the programming, if the trainer can take that away and realize that Olympic lifts aren't just one thing, they're able to do many things for you and be placed in many different areas of a program. I think that, of all things, would be probably the most important takeaway. How do I use them?
Yeah. So Rodney, I guess my final question to you is, what do you want to leave our audience with? I mean, obviously this the whole textbook is amazing. And if you guys don't have it or haven't even signed up for the course, I am going to throw that out there. That's one of probably my new favorites. But what would be your final takeaway, Rodney, that you want to leave us with?
Final takeaway is go through it. go through the PES, read the information, and try to go through it to learn it.
Oh, can you say that again?
Go through it to learn it. And I'm saying that because after more than 25 years now, we as an industry need to start learning information, not just seeing information. And then when we learn it, we need to apply that information. And when we apply it, then we need to make adjustments, because none of us are perfect. So we have to continue to get better, and don't be afraid of it. Do not be afraid of the Olympic lifts, because the Olympic lifts are actually very simple. They're a bunch of simple lifts that you put together, and you only put them together as you're able to.
Love it.
Where can people find you, Rodney, if they want to take a workshop? And guys, if you get an opportunity to take a workshop with Rodney Corn, I'm telling you, please do it, because he's unbelievable. He taught Marty and I. If you guys, some people will say, you guys know a lot. We have Rodney to thank for a ton of that. And so, but Rodney, when or where can they find you to do some of these workshops that you're offering?
We actually have a weightlifting workshop July 26th and 27th in Austin, Texas. So it'll be at the Eleco headquarters, which is a beautiful, beautiful training facility. And they can come there and go and learn this live. So it'll be myself And Dr. Lane Palm, who's a chiropractor, one of our educators, who's a national champion weightlifter. He was at the Arnold Classic and won the Arnold Classic in the weightlifting section. So he and I will both be there. We're both two white bald guys. Can't miss it. So he's way stronger than I am. So we'll be teaching that July 26th and 27th. And if you just go to aleco.com/education, on that education page, you can click on courses and you'll be able to see information. They can also contact me directly. It's just rodney.corn@aleco.com. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions or send them links if they want to sign up and all that stuff. And don't forget that the NASM, as part of the NASM community, they do have a discount code. So you guys do have, I believe it's a 20% discount code on all of our courses. So, and the course is only $399 to begin with, comes with payment plan too of 3 payments. So with your discount, it's just above $300, something like that.
And you guys would log into your NASM account, go under pro discounts, and you guys would see that there. That's the easiest place to go. And then Rodney, just to make sure that we're crystal clear, if somebody knows nothing about Olympic lifting, is this a course that they need to take, or do they need to have some sort of background?
No, you can walk in off the street and take it. And I guarantee you, when you leave, you will be confident and competent on how to perform the movements and how to kind of place them in the programming.
Love it. Love it.
Right. And then I'm sure they get CEUs for the work.
They'll get CEUs. So obviously we have 1.4 CEUs through NASM.
Perfect. Thank you for adding that in. Well, Rodney, we always love to have it on. It's been a 20+ year journey for us learning from you. So whenever we can get you the microphone to speak to the NASM family, we will always bring you back, my friend.
My pleasure. It's great to see you both, and keep doing what you're doing.
Awesome. Thanks, Rodney. Appreciate you.
It's always great having Mr. Corn on.
Telling you, he's one of my favorites.
I'll trump you. He's my favorite then. There you go.
Well,
Rodney's great. You and I, we talk so many things about the days of being quizzed by Rodney, right? At the beginning of our NASM journey. It was awesome.
He's your canoe guy, right?
Yeah. Can't fire a cannon from a canoe. But it's more, and this is to your point before we close, is you need to go see him teach his live, because he's not just going to lecture at you. He's not going to just give you answers. He's going to change the way you think. And this complicated information becomes so much more clear. He's a master at that. There's no question.
Well, and Marty, you can totally agree to this. I'm sure if you ask Rodney a question, he's going to say, well, what do you think? And so you better have some kind of or you better know something before you ask him. Just kidding. Right. But he will challenge you to think, which is one of the reasons, I adore him so much, because he will be out of my comfort zone for sure.
Thanks for getting him on. And for all of you that joined us today, we can't thank you enough. Reach out to us. You know how to get a hold of us. We've given you the information many times, but Wendy, you want to give it out real quick?
Our information is, if you want to email me, you can find me at wendy.batts@nasm.org, or you can find me on Instagram at wendy.batts13.
And my info is popping up here, dr.martymiller72, and then marty.miller@nasm.org. All right. Thanks so much for joining us this week. We look forward to seeing you next week on the Master Instructor Roundtable.